What about second breakfast?
Time for second breakfast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Second Breakfast, Spooky Season Edition. So at time of recording this, we are getting very close to the Halloween season. So I wanted to do a handful of Second Breakfast episodes on things that were, a little bit creepy, a little bit weird. I know I've already done a handful on here that have kind of fallen into that category, but for this next few weeks, and again, we say it all the time, podcast math is hard. I don't know exactly when this is going to come out. I don't know exactly the order these are going to come out. As of right now, this is the first one I'm recording, and it kind of goes into some of the later ones, but who knows? It doesn't matter. This isn't going to be like a 4, 5, 6-part series in the same way the new metal albums list was. This is more of just a loose category of things that are a little bit spooky and maybe a little macabre compared to what we normally talk about here. But it's still going to be predominantly music-based, so it fits the format, and I thought it would be fun. So, to kick things off, I wanted to tell the story about a young blues musician from way, way back in the day, a man by the name of Robert Johnson. Now, if you are a bit of a music scholar, you probably know who this man is. If you like weird, creepy stories about musicians, you probably know who this guy is. I'm not going to try to be the end-all be-all here and tell you this man's entire life story, but there is something very creepy about this guy, and it's a very cool story that you've probably heard in some way, shape, or form, but maybe you didn't know it was this guy in particular. Whatever the case may be, Robert Johnson's story is very interesting, and it's a lot of fun for spooky season. So if you don't know, Robert Johnson was an American blues musician and songwriter. He's kind of considered one of the greatest blues musicians of all time. But what's interesting about that is he did not record a lot. And he's only got a very short window of actually performing and writing music. But his influence has been felt for generations and generations. And a lot of the bands that we talk about on the show, they're influenced by bands that were influenced by Robert Johnson. So he was known as possibly the greatest Delta blues style player of all time, and is considered one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. And the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame even described him as perhaps the first ever rock star. Now, why am I talking about him now for spooky season? If you know who he is and you know where this story is going, you already know why. But in case you don't, there's a very interesting part of his life. The part where he may or may not have made a deal with the devil to become a great blues musician. So, let's get into it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Robert Johnson's life, what kind of got him to the crossroads where he made this deal with the devil. And again, this isn't supposed to be the definitive biography of Mr. Robert Johnson. There are films, there are documentaries. I think there's tons of cool YouTube videos. I think there's like a 45, 50-minute documentary on Netflix. I did not get a chance to watch it, but just a couple of clicks online and you'll find all kinds of cool stuff about this guy if you want to go deeper. So, Johnson was born May 8th, 1911 in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. His parents were forced out of their home in Mississippi due to racial stuff, and ended up living in Memphis, Tennessee. Johnson spent the next 8 or 9 years in Memphis going to school, and this is when he started to kind of get a love for music. Johnson and his mother moved around a bit. His parents did separate, and they ended up moving back across the Mississippi River to Commerce in the Mississippi Delta near Tunica and Robinsonville. So shortly thereafter, Johnson married his first wife. This would have been in February of 1929. I believe she was only 14, and she died shortly after they got married while giving birth to their child. Now, a lot of this, especially the dates, are a little bit ambiguous because obviously back in the 1920s and 30s, it was a little harder to keep records of things, especially for lower income families such as the Johnsons. And then also they were African American. So things weren't quite, kept up with the same way they would be today. So that's why some of the dates, like, February of 1929, it's kind of left that way. However, around this time, this blues musician by the name of Son House moved to Robinsonville, where with his partner, Willie Brown, lived. Now, later in his life, House remembers Johnson used to come and see him play, and he was a very competent harmonica player. And in between sets, Johnson would ask if he could play House's guitar, and they would say, sure, why not, and hand him the guitar. But after a couple of minutes, they basically said, no, you have to stop, because it was awful. And around this time, Johnson was trying to write and perform his own songs, but Son House said it was so bad that in between their sets, the people would often complain and tell him to stop playing because it was so bad. Now, a little later in 1931, Robert Johnson left town. No one really knows exactly where he went. So some people say that he was looking for his biological father. Some say he just basically hunkered down somewhere and just really honed his guitar skills and his songwriting skills. Others say he went to a local crossroads to make a deal with the devil. The story goes, Robert Johnson went to a local crossroads with his guitar a little before midnight. He started playing his songs. Right about midnight, the devil appeared. He took the guitar, tuned it, played a song, and handed it back to Johnson. This was the transaction that the end result would be Robert Johnson giving his soul to the devil so he could be a master of the guitar. Now, when Robert Johnson returned back in 1932, nobody could believe how much better of a musician he was. Son House recalls watching and hearing Johnson when he got back. And this is a quote from Son House. He said, "He was so good, when he was finished, all our mouths were standing open." After this, Johnson began to go around playing shows, and it seemed he continued to get better and better. He would play dances and bars and play, his originals, and people loved it. Now, in November of 1936, Johnson went in to record some of these songs. He was basically in and out of the studio until the summer of 1937. Altogether, he recorded 29 songs. I think altogether there's like 41 recordings. It's 29 distinct songs and then like a handful of outtakes and stuff like that. But essentially 29 songs is how many he recorded. And that's all he recorded because about a year later, Johnson died. He died in 1938. Now, nobody knows exactly how he died. One theory is that he died of untreated syphilis that he may have gotten passed down from one of his parents. That was not that uncommon back in the day. There's also, given, the selling his soul to the devil, perhaps more fittingly, there is a story that he was possibly murdered. The story goes that he was playing a gig at this dance, and there was this woman who kept coming to see him play, and she was married. So one night, her husband was there and bought Johnson a drink and supposedly tried to poison him. Is that true? Who knows? There's even one, and this to me seems kind of wild, kind of far-fetched, but supposedly at some point, a blues historian went back and interviewed a whole bunch of people from this area around this time and supposedly knows that Johnson was indeed murdered and does know who the murderer is, but for some reason will not disclose any of that information. So do with that what you will. Now, Johnson remained relatively unknown until the early 60s, specifically 1961, when Columbia Records released the album King of the Delta Blues Singers. This was a compilation of all of his songs, all 29 songs. This is considered one of the greatest albums of all time. It's been, several artists have mentioned Johnson as an influence on their own music, including the Rolling Stones, Fleetwood Mac, Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, and the list goes on and on and on. I forgot to mention a lot of these song titles also help to further the mystery about the deal with the devil and perhaps being murdered. I don't remember a ton of them off the top of my head, but a lot of them have the words like devil and death, and if I had control over Judgment Day or something like that. So his lyrics were also of kind of a darker nature, which kind of lends itself to this story. His song Crossroad Blues is in the Grammy Hall of Fame. He actually won a Grammy in 1990 for Best Historical Album, and he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986. Now, I mentioned already that he died in 1938. Now, I told you earlier he was born in 1911, which means he died at the age of 27. Now, if that sounds interesting to you, then you definitely want to stick around for some later episodes of Second Breakfast Spooky Season Edition, because on a future episode, we will go into why that number 27 is so interesting and do an episode on the 27 Club. And if you don't know what that is, well, I'm happy to tell you all about it. So if you enjoyed listening to this, let me know. If you are familiar with Robert Johnson, if you like his music, obviously on Breakdowns for Breakfast, we don't do a ton of blues music, but we talk about, blues riffs and blues influence on a lot of the artists that we do cover. So, like I said, there's no doubt that, hey, maybe Bad Omens was not directly influenced by Robert Johnson, but I bet some of Bad Omens' influences were influenced by Robert Johnson. So anyway, I hope you liked that. I hope it's getting you in the mood for spooky season. I know it's starting to get, here in North Carolina, the leaves are starting to change. The breeze is starting to get a little heavier. I love it. It's my favorite time of the year. So I hope you enjoyed this episode about Robert Johnson. Be sure to email us, breakdownsbreakfast@gmail.com. Hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, all the new normal places. And come back. We'll have some more spooky stories for you. Have a great day.